So the last few days I've had an absolute blast shooting with this little 7.5mm fisheye lens in the Canon M50. And I must admit, fisheye lenses are something that I really enjoyed in the past, but I have not shot fisheye photography in probably about 2 years. So coming back to it, I was just sort of remembering how fun it is and how whimsical it can be. It can also be sort of a real challenge, like learning how to use a fisheye lens. And I will put a link to the lens and all the details in the description down below. One of the biggest challenges about using a fisheye lens is that photography is really about deciding what is going to be in the frame of your photo and what isn't, and sort of how you frame that. And with a fisheye lens, it's so wide that you get so much in. That can be quite challenging, where with a more sort of zoomed in or telephoto lens, you just move a little to the left, little to the right. It's quite easy to eliminate distracting objects in the frame and just sort of include the things that you really want to be the focal point. But with a fisheye, you're getting everything in. So it is kind of a challenge at times, but when you do get good fisheye photos, I think they are really, really cool. Now, this lens was sent out to me by a company called They make very good quality, inexpensive lenses, and prior to them sending me this lens, I have bought their lenses in the past, and I've always been happy with the optics, and particularly for a really budget-friendly lens, the sharpness on this thing is unbelievable. It is an incredibly sharp lens, which is one thing that often lets more of these sort of budget lenses down, but certainly as far as sharpness goes, this thing is spot on. Now, as far as the build quality goes, it's pretty basic. It's a combination of sort of plastic and metal. It has a polished metal mount. It has a plastic built-in lens hood. The aperture ring is sort of a bit, uninspiring, but the focus ring is quite well dampened. And the thing you really notice when you sort of take this thing out of the box and have a look at it is that crazy fisheye element. I mean, it is just this amazing bulbous fisheye element on the front that just reaches out and sort of brings all of pretty much everything around you. And if you don't watch it, it'll actually easily get your hand in the shot and your feet in the shot. So it is pretty cool. I do love the look of a fisheye lens. The other thing that I didn't love, but it worked okay, is it has this little push-on plastic lens cap. It is all plastic. It's somewhat uninspiring. I push it on, and I just kept thinking the thing was going to fall off. It never did. I mean, it does stick on pretty well, but I do think if you sort of bump it a few times, it probably could come off because it doesn't really click on. It just sort of pushes on and stays there by friction. Now, I think when people think of fisheye lenses, the first things they think about is these goofy pictures where you've gotten really close to somebody's face and their nose is big and their sort of features are all distorted and their ears are small and sticking out behind their head. And to be honest, that's kind of like a boring picture and certainly not really a reason to take fisheye photos or get a fisheye lens, because you take a few photos like that and sort of they're all going to look the same and you're sort of kind of done with it. The other thing that you often see with fisheye lenses is skate photography and skate video. Now, if you are somebody that is into that, then I think the fisheye look is really cool. It's really popular, and it's kind of a part of that genre of sort of photo and video. So I think that lens makes a lot of sense for those people. But it's the rest of us, like people like me, that it's really a question of where does this lens fit in? Like, what is the purpose of this lens in your collection of lenses? And the first thing I would say is it is not a lens that I would recommend to somebody as a second or third lens. I think it's a lens for somebody that has a few lenses already, is happy with those lenses, and are just looking for something a little bit different, a little bit creative, and maybe something to challenge yourself and challenge your photography, because certainly fisheye photography does do that. It challenges you. And so when I took this lens out, there was really two things that I was thinking about and trying to achieve. The first one is think about that distortion and work with fisheye distortion to create an interesting image. The second thing that I was trying to do was actually sort of eliminate that fisheye distortion. Like take a photo that kind of hides or blends that fisheye distortion into the image in a way that it almost just looks like a wide angle shot. And so those were the two things that I kind of had in mind as I was walking around the city and sort of taking these photos. So I'll just take you through some of the photos I've got, what I thought of them, where they're from, and just the type of thing that fisheye photography can do for your photography. Now, this first image is just an example of how wide this lens gets. Obviously, it's a 7.5mm fisheye, so you're getting a ton of information in the picture. And this is just Melbourne Central Shopping Centre in the centre of Melbourne, Australia. And there's actually a number of elements in this photo that are curved already. So when you're using a fisheye lens, it's curving some elements, but there's other elements that are already curved going in other directions. So it gets you kind of a interesting, surreal effect. And it doesn't necessarily jump out at me as a fisheye photo because of all the natural curves in the photo. Now this is in the library, Melbourne's library. Once again, you can see the distortion of the columns, but this is just a super wide shot. I don't think it looks overly fisheye, and those columns aren't at the very edges of the frame, so you kind of get an effect that looks like an ultra-wide angle lens. I actually think this kind of looks like an Apple store. Here's another shot, once again in the library, just sort of shooting with some books and out into the main part of the library. Now this next one is an example of how you can make the lens look like a fisheye lens or just a normal sort of wide angle lens. So if we look at this, it's obviously a fisheye lens because of the distortion of those doors. And I'm shooting into a room that has kind of rounded edges and a rounded ceiling to some extent, which is going to hide the fisheye effect if I position myself correctly. And we look at this next photo, and I moved into the room. Now, to me, this looks mostly just like a wide angle lens. There's no significantly straight lines that I see that are jumping out at me as distorted. So this just looks like an ultra wide angle lens. Once again, here's before. This is when you've got the doors in the shot at the edge of the frame, obvious fisheye, and we moved in and those doors aren't in the shot, and now it actually just looks like a wide angle lens. Here's a shot that you absolutely could not get without a lens this wide at 7.5 millimeters. So we've got sort of the ceiling and ornate ceiling in shot. Once again, there's not a whole lot of straight lines here. We have straight lines, but it's sort of a, I don't know, octagonal. I don't know how many shapes are there, maybe more than that. But those help hide the fisheye effect. Here's another one, sort of I got a bit of a lower angle, and I really love this perspective. You see these people close to me with the big tables, and then you have sort of the ornate backdrop there. I think that's pretty cool. Here's another, this is a stairwell shot. And actually, it was super dark in here, and this was sort of a really grainy, sort of not great looking photo, so I just threw it into black and white. And if you look at the staircase, that doesn't look overly distorted, but if you look up at the top of the frame, sort of where the ceiling is, you can see the fisheye distortion. Here's a bit of a street photography shot, which I thought was an interesting one. Just some people walking by. And once again, we've got so much of the scene in. You could not get this much of the scene in without shooting with a fisheye lens. This is under a bridge, and I just thought the graffiti and everything was interesting. And there's a lot of, once again, this is sort of a sweeping, curving path. So it kind of hides the fisheye distortion a little bit because there's curved elements in it already. And then I took this position and I really liked it because it's just totally wraparound shot, and we've got people sort of running and riding bikes as they go by. And yeah, I just really loved the effect that the fisheye shot gave me through here. I thought that was pretty cool. Here's an example of what the fisheye does with elements at the side of the frame. So if we look on the right side of the frame, you see that column. Look how crazy distorted that is. That's an obvious fisheye looking effect. But if you go to the next column up, you see that's a lot more square. It's still bent, it's still distorted, but it's a lot more square. And if you just crop this photo in and got rid of that column closest to the edge of frame, you're actually going to get rid of a lot of that fisheye distortion. So that kind of allows you to sort of use the lens in two different ways. One as a fisheye and one as more of a wide angle. This is me just having my sushi, and I put this one in because it's an example. You can see the sushi dish is in focus, but because this shoots at f2.8, even though it is an ultra wide angle lens, which has a very deep depth of field and deep area in focus, I still got an out of focus background by focusing very close, which is another cool element of this lens. You actually can focus quite close and actually blow out the background like I've done here. This is another one in Melbourne Central. Once again, you get the effect of seeing all that stuff sort of straight off in front of you, but then being able to see straight down, which that fisheye lens gets you that sort of huge field of view. And here's one which I thought was neat. I've got a photo of sort of the ornate stuff going on the ceiling there, the sort of decorations, but then the people underneath. And once again, I don't think this one looks overly fisheye because there's all kinds of different curves and things going on in the shot. This is a train coming out of a tunnel, and the tunnel is already curved. So there is an element of like curves in this image already. If you look at the sign on the left of the frame there, you'll obviously see the distortion, but I've used the fisheye lens in an area where they're already curved. So they're sort of working together. Now here's the kids in the car. Now this is an interesting challenge. If you see because the fisheye lens gets so much in, it was getting the outside and those windows, which were all overexposed, and then the inside of the car was underexposed. So I had to really lift the shadows to make this work. But this points out a real challenge with fisheye sometimes. It gets so much of the image in, it's going to get the lightest parts of any given scene or any given situation, but it's also going to get the darkest parts. So you're going to have this sort of huge variation in exposure, and that can kind of make exposing the image challenging at times. And it's often worth underexposing a little bit and actually shooting raw and editing it if that's something that you're into. This next one's in the car. I thought this was pretty cool. You've got the tram there. Once again, just this huge surreal field of view. You can just see so much in the shot. Here's a couple environmental portraits at a little fish and chip place. This is my son. Once again, you get so much of the scene in. And then I had him stand in front of this the table where we sat with the sort of little neon fish in the background. Now, if you look at this one, you've got the coffee pot or teapot there. That is round, but then you've got the distortion around it. So when you put round objects in the frame when you're using the fisheye, it creates a really sort of weird effect because the brain is trying to figure out, wait, there's parts of this image that are curved that I know shouldn't be, but then there's the teapot in the middle, which is curved, which I know should be. And it just kind of, I don't know, creates a real sort of mind-bending effect when you include round elements in the scene. And even this sort of little round pot or the round watering can behind the teapot kind of adds to that. Now here's a couple of shots. These are the ones that you often see people with fisheye, the close-ups to people's face that just look sort of crazy. I think these are a bit overdone. They can be fun. It's easy to get this kind of crazy, surreal effect. But once again, I think this is a bit of a gimmick. You take a few shots like this and you're probably done. I wouldn't buy a fisheye lens just to get shots like that. Here's us having coffee. They did this little Pegasus. I thought that was pretty cool, so I got a shot of that. And once again, I've blown out the background. You've got a blurry background even with the lens like this. Here's another one, which it's, once again, wide angle lens, but if you look at the lines in this, they're mostly pretty straight. I mean, it really looks more like a wide angle than sort of a fisheye. Now, here's an example of something you really got to watch out for. You can see I got both my hand, in the bottom of the frame, you see my hand and my feet in the shot. So that's something you really have to be careful of, and I got that. That happened to me a number of times. Here's a little statue. Once again, working with perspective distortion. So look, his head looks big and crazy, and then his feet look sort of tall or small down at the bottom. Now, I saw these seagulls attacking these chips, and I thought it just kind of looked like something out of a 1980s music video or something like that. I thought that was 80s, 90s music video. Anyways, I thought that was a pretty cool shot. And then just back in that sort of Melbourne Central, this is the shot tower again. Once again, look at the shot tower itself. Looks pretty straight. And then we've got all these curved elements around the side. I thought that was kind of a neat image. Once again, I underexposed this, and then I sort of changed, used the raw file to change the exposure to sort of get what I wanted out of it. So although I think fisheye photography isn't for everyone, I think if you're a person that's kind of done everything and you're running out of your creative juices and you want to try something new, or if you feel like you sort of have every lens that you really need, but you just want to do something a little bit different, this is a pretty budget-friendly way to try out fisheye photography. Now, buying a new lens is only one way to spark your creativity and improve your photography, but the best thing you can do for your photography is increase your skills. And I've just thrown a video on screen now. This is one of the best photography tutorials I have ever done, and I promise if you watch that video, at the end of that video, you will be a better photographer than you are right now.